Oppenheimer doesn't want you to see this. Kidding. As seen with TV today, the meta has always been, look at this person. Now let's laugh at them. I always thought that was a newer trend, or at least semi-new, like early 2000s. But I'm dead wrong with that because that trait goes back to at least 1955 with the show titled This Is Your Life. It was a popular talk show back in the day that took people of somewhat significance and kind of like interviewed them in a unique way where they were going to have like special guest stars that were relevant to them in some way, act as a surprise. Well, one episode aired starring Kiyoshi Tanimoto, who is a survivor of the World War II bombing in Hiroshima. As a Methodist minister, he's accredited for assisting and rehabilitating the Hiroshima maidens after the bombing. That's pretty much his relevance for being on the show aside from being a survivor of the bombing. However, Ralph Edwards, the host of the show, thought it would be a phenomenal idea to bring out Robert A. Lewis. For those of you that don't know, Lewis was the co-pilot for the aircraft responsible for the bombing. The bombing of Hiroshima. The same bombing that Tanimoto survived and changed his life forever. I don't know who the fuck gave the stamp of approval here, and as fucked up as it sounds, they were just way ahead of the curve. Decades ahead of the curve, even. Needless to say, what followed was extremely painful. The 30-minute episode starts with kind of a basic, like, who are you? Like, how you doing? Whatever, like, you know, basic introduction stuff. Tanimoto talks about the great work he's been doing with the maidens, and it's kind of like a really, like, wholesome start. Like, kind of gives you a good introduction of, like, what this guy's done with his life, especially after such a traumatic experience.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Would you tell us your name, please?
Kiyoshi Tanimoto.
Tanimoto.
Yes.
And your occupation, Mr. Tanimoto?
Minister, Christian minister.
Right.
Yes.
What is that work, sir, that you are doing right now at the present moment?
Well, I brought a group of girls who have a terrible disfigurement on account of atomic explosion on Hiroshima.
And you have accompanied these girls
Yes,
over?
and we are hoping to have plastic surgery for them.
You hear a word from their sponsor just before he details his survival, and this was a moment where you could really tell it was from the 50s.
In this bottle of Hazel Bishop's fabulous new nail polish that stays on beautifully, twice as long as any other, without chipping. Now, here's a test that proves it. Now, I'm sure that all of you ladies know what this is.
Now we're at the part where Tanimoto describes his survival, and it is honestly really heartbreaking, just very traumatic. You can tell he's obviously, like, not thrilled to be talking about it, but willing to get vulnerable with the audience. I don't find anything wrong with this. I think he was probably expecting to be talking about this with them.
You started to tell us what you saw. What did you see?
Well, I saw the whole city on fire. And many people running away from the city in silence. Their skin peeling off, the hanging from face, from arm, but strange to say, in silence, it looked like a procession of ghosts.
But when they add things like the air raid horn for like dramatic effect.
So at 6 in the morning, you're lending a helping hand to a member of your parish when suddenly piercing blast of the air raid siren goes off.
That's no different than getting your dog to bark at someone you know survived a horrific dog attack.
At 0600 on the morning of August the 6th, 1945, I was in a B-29 flying over the Pacific. Destination, Hiroshima.
A voice and a man whose life is destined to be woven up in the threads of your own, Reverend Tanimoto. Now, we'll meet him later on in our story. Right now.
Never have I seen a man more unenthused after hearing something in his entire life. Next, he was greeted by Bertha Starkey, who was an immense mentor to him, and it's honestly a really wholesome moment, and it even moves him to tears.
Because coming through it is Miss Bertha Starkey of Warrensville, Ohio. Here's Miss Starkey. Miss Starkey, I know, it's a wonderful meeting here.
They pretty much talk about how amazing and, like, essential they are to each other's lives, and then she even points out that she's responsible for, like, kind of setting up him and his current wife now. Just an all-around good moment. It'd be a shame if something terrible were to happen in a couple minutes. Next up was Marvin Green, another great friend of Tanimoto's who he hadn't seen in years. They reminisce over school briefly, and it's kind of just, you know, another great moment. Nothing wrong going on here. For a second, I bet I had you fooled. Surely they're not going to nullify the last 15 minutes by doing something spineless, selfish, and evil for their own amusal. Buckle up.
Now, you've never met him, have never seen him, but he's here tonight to clasp your hand in friendship. Captain Robert Lewis, United States Air Force, who along with Paul Tibbets piloted the plane from which the first atomic power was dropped over Hiroshima. Captain Lewis, come in here close, and would you tell us, sir, of your experience on August 6, 1945?
Well, Mr. Edwards, we left Tinian in the Mariana Islands at about 2:45 in the morning on August the 6th, 1945. Our destination was Japan. We had 3 targets. One was Hiroshima, one was Nagasaki, one was Kokura. About an hour before we hit the coastline of Japan, we were notified that Hiroshima was clear. Therefore, Hiroshima became our target. Just before 8:15 a.m. Tokyo time, Tom Farabee, a very able bombardier, carefully aimed at his target, which was the 2nd Imperial Japanese Army headquarters. 8:15 promptly, the bomb was dropped. We turned fast to get out of the way of the deadly radiation and bomb effects. First was a big flash that we got, and then the 2 concussion waves hit the ship. Shortly after, we turned back to see what had happened. And there in front of our eyes, the city of Hiroshima disappeared.
Yeah. Obviously, this is horrible for Tanimoto, but let's not act like Lewis is sitting there jumping for joy either. Apparently, Lewis was also left in the dark here. From what I read, he was told he was going to detail, like, you know, dropping the bomb, which is probably already difficult enough. But I'm pretty sure they left the whole, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to be face-to-face with a survivor out. I mean, he clearly looks super uncomfortable. He's kind of like fumbling over his words, very sweaty, and his body language just screams uncomfortable. Clearly carrying some type of burden, because how could you not? Immediately following, Tanimoto is bombarded with questions like asking about what it was like seeing people gravely injured and how he kind of felt guilty because he didn't really get injured at all.
Were you hurt, Reverend Tanimoto?
I was safe.
But as you run along the highway into the city in search of your wife and baby, you're stunned by the human destruction which you see. Now, you've told us pretty much about this, Reverend Tanimoto. You've told us about what you saw. Fires have sprung up everywhere. Your way into the city is blocked. You keep running, trying to get to your home, your church. You apologize to people along the way because you are unhurt.
But then in the midst of all the questioning, you can hear his wife's voice on the intercom.
主人と私があんなところで会えたことは幸いでした。
Yes, Reverend Tanimoto, it's true. From your home in Hiroshima, which you just left to surprise you, even as she did on August 6th, is your wife, Chisaka Tanimoto. Here she is.
Seeing this dude's face light up as he hears his wife's voice is really uplifting, probably because he's in a really dark spot at the time. It's probably on par with like getting a spoonful of water in a barren desert, dying of thirst. But this light would be very short-lived. They do a quick little like hug and exchange, and then she sits down and Ralph just cuts to the chase and immediately starts asking about her experience as a survivor. No, hey, how you doing? Like, how was your flight? Nothing like that, just straight to the meat and potatoes.
Mrs. Tanimoto, I think we really surprised your husband. Where were you when the bomb fell?
原子爆弾が落ちた時、私は高校で入って家の下敷きになりました。
What did your wife say, Reverend Tanimoto?
I forgot first.
He probably forgot because the last thing he wants to be doing right now is translating his wife's horrific experience for her, on top of already getting vulnerable with his own. Moving forward, Ralph talks about the end of the war as Tanimoto has the like saddest 1,000-yard stare of all time. Then they kind of get back to the roots of the conversation, or how he's been rehabilitating women who have been victims of the bombing. Yet another surprise guest is revealed when his kids come out, and it's another great and wholesome moment, and his kids are ecstatic to see him. You know, it's just heartwarming. The broadcast ends with everyone, Lewis included, coming back out as Edwards drips up the family with couplings, a projector, a copy of that night's broadcast, I guess so they can like mourn as a family together and relive this traumatic experience. Some jewelry, 2 $500 checks from their sponsor. Mind you, $500 back then is like over $5,000 in today's currency, so kind of like pretty decent amount of money for them. Then Ralph encourages the audience to donate by dropping the address of like a place where you can send money to them. And Lewis would actually be the first to contribute on behalf of his family and company. So I guess it kind of makes up what they did to him. Fuck no. Obviously, times were different back then, and I think people held some type of resentment towards Japanese people after the war, even though, like, there was no reason to. Absolutely no reason for this man to get treated this way. It's really horrible. It's really condescending and just demented. I think setting up a cordial meeting between Tanimoto and Lewis with their approval is like not a bad idea. Kind of reminds you if you lose a loved one to a drunk driver, maybe you go to see the person in jail and you kind of come face to face with the person who did it and you kind of come to terms with it in a way. I don't know, maybe that's not a good example, but it's kind of a similar principle. Maybe not necessary, but you do have that option if it'll help you like kind of come to terms with things. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up my video. I'm pretty surprised this video has kind of flown under the radar. I don't know if it's because Oppenheimer just came out, that's why it got recommended, but even then it still has like 83,000 views, which I think is not near enough. Like, this is just seriously such a crazy thing that happened in history, and to see it now is just like mind-boggling. But that's all I have for you guys. If you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Comment if you'd like, and as always, thank you for watching.